All About Dinosaurs by Roy Chapman Andrews. Illustrated by Thomas W. Voter. Narrated by Anita Saran. Chapter 8. Dinosaurs of the Flaming Cliffs. I have told how our Central Asiatic expedition discovered the first dinosaurs known from Asia. That happened as soon as we got into the Gobi Desert. That was a good beginning. And luck continued. New mammals, plants, and fossil animals were found almost every day. There was excitement of other kinds too. Sometimes we sat huddled in the tents for hours while sandstorms raged. Bandits were reported in the grasslands to the north of us. Their leader was a giant Mongol named Kula. He was reported to be a terrible man. When he attacked a caravan, he murdered every man, woman, and child. We feared he might try to get our motor cars if he heard of our expedition. That would have meant a battle. But week after week, we plunged deeper into the Gobi. At last, we were too far out in the waterless desert for Kula to follow. Only camels could live there. Kula's horses would have died of thirst and starvation. But the weather was getting colder. Golden plover drifted down from the Arctic tundras in great flocks. Geese and ducks formed black lines against the sky. Sometimes light snow powdered the desert. Those were signs of winter that no explorer could ignore. The main caravan trail was many miles away through unexplored country. If we were caught by a blizzard, we might never be able to get out. I was worried. When we started home, our navigators had set a course by compass straight across the desert. The going was very bad for the cars. We had to drive over gravel and sand and wind-blown hummocks covered with thorny bushes. For 100 miles there had been no sign of water. Our water bags were dry and we were thirsty because every drop had to go into the cars. An hour before sunset, on the third day, I saw a Mongol tent, or yurt, far away. Where there were people, there must be water. Our photographer, J.B. Shackelford, was with me in the leading car, far in front of the fleet. I said to him, "You wait here and stop the others when they come. I'll go to the yurt and ask where we can find water." He got out and I drove to the Mongol camp. Only a man and his wife were there. He told me of a well not far away. When I returned to the cars, all the men were gathered about Dr. Walter Granger, the chief paleontologist. In his hand he held a white skull 8 inches long. "Take a look at this," he said. "What do you think of it?" I examined it carefully. It was a reptile and probably a dinosaur, but I had never seen anything like it. "Where," I asked, "did you get it?" "Shackelford found it just over there," Granger said. He pointed to the north where the top of a red cliff showed above the rim of the plain. Shack said he had told the men in the other cars to wait for me, and then he had wandered off towards the red cliff. There he stood on the edge of a great badland depression. He walked down into it a little way to see what it was like. Right in front of him, resting on a piece of red sandstone, was the white skull. He picked it up and hurried back to the cars. Shack's discovery was so exciting that we knew we had to search further. The Mongol had told me of a well in the depression which we called a basin. This was the spot for us. We agreed to camp overnight near the well. "Then we can hunt fossils till dark," I said. You can't imagine what a beautiful place it was. We looked into a vast pink bowl. It had been scooped out of the plain by the action of wind and frost and rain. In the basin, giant hills stood alone like strange living beasts carved from sandstone. One of them we named the dinosaur, for it resembled a brontosaurus sitting on its haunches. Other formations looked like castles of the Middle Ages. We could imagine spires and towers, gateways, walls, and ramparts. Caves ran deep into the rock, cut by ravines and gullies. At the beginning of darkness, a wild, mysterious beauty lay with the purple shadows in every canyon. In the last rays of the setting sun, the rocks seemed to be on fire. We named the place the Flaming Cliffs. The day was September 2, 1922. As soon as camp was made, all of us scattered over the basin floor, looking for fossils. Bits of white bone were everywhere. Several men saw skeletons partly exposed in the rock. There wasn't time to take them out, for night was on us. In the morning, it was hard to leave such a wonderful place, but the feel of snow was in the air. We might be trapped if we waited even one day more. So we pushed ahead. 2 days later, the blizzard came. By then, we had reached the main caravan trail and were safe, but it was a narrow escape. As soon as we returned to our house in Peking, one of the men left for New York. He carried with him the small white reptile skull Shackelford had discovered at the Flaming Cliffs. A month later, we had a cable from Professor Osborne, president of the American Museum of Natural History. "You have made a very important discovery. The reptile is the long-sought ancestor of Triceratops. It has been named Protoceratops andrewsi in your honor. Go back and get more." The next summer we did go back to the Flaming Cliffs. We went through the desolation of a sun-parched desert. For 10 months there had been no rain. We followed the tracks our motor cars had made 10 months before. Even the hard, wire-like grass lay brown and dead in the burning sun. White rims of alkali marked the beds of former ponds. The desert swam in a maddening dancing mirage. Reedy lakes and cool forested islands were mirrored where we knew there was only sand. We travelled mile after mile without seeing a living thing except spotted lizards and long-tailed gazelles that do not need water. The way was marked by the skulls of camels and of sheep. Beside the dead ashes of a campfire lay the skeleton of a Mongol woman. Her bones had been picked clean by wolves and vultures. The few Mongols who used to live there had all moved away because they could find no water. Before we started, I told Merrin, the leader of a caravan, that he must cross this desolate place. His camels were to carry the gasoline and supplies that would make it possible for the expedition to work. He said, "I cannot go. The camels will die." "That is true, but some will live," I told him. "Leave the weak ones behind, but bring 20 camels with gasoline and food. I'll make up 20 special loads." He shook his head, for he was an old-time caravan leader. He did not want to lose the camels, even though they belonged to me. To him it was a point of honor to bring all his camels through alive and well. Finally, Merrin agreed to try. "I will come," he said at last. That was enough. I knew he would keep his word and that I would count on him to bring up the supplies to carry on. Our motor cars carried us 100 miles a day over the forsaken waste. In midsummer, we again pitched our tents at the well of the Flaming Cliffs. We arrived at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Before night, every fossil hunter had found a skeleton. Even I had a share in the finds. While walking in the bottom of a ravine, I saw a pipe lying beside a rock. It was one that Dr. Granger had lost the year before. Strangely enough, it had dropped within a few inches of the skull and jaws of a Protoceratops andrewsi. For more than a month, we worked at this one spot. 75 skulls and 12 skeletons of Protoceratops were taken out. They showed every stage in the growth of this ancestral dinosaur. Nothing like this series had ever been discovered. They begin with a newly hatched baby only a few inches long. This little fellow had no shield or frill. As the dinosaur grew, the shield must have grown also. It got bigger and bigger, and in the very old individuals covered the entire neck. That is like the shield of the giant Triceratops. The front of the face of Protoceratops formed a hooked parrot-like beak. But although he is the ancestor of the horned dinosaurs, he had no horns. This is not surprising. for he was the first of his line. The horns had not yet begun to develop. I must admit that even though Protoceratops andrews was named for me, he was one of the ugliest of all the small dinosaurs. His short, toad-like body seemed to be mostly head. A piece of bone from the frill projected downward on each side of his face. It looked like a long wart. His short legs were badly bowed. The tail was fat and thick. He crawled on his belly. No leaping or running for him. For food, he probably nipped off bits of the desert plants with his hooked beak. No, I can't be proud of his looks. But this dinosaur helped scientists to understand where the ceratopsians originated and how they came to look the way they did. Even after 5 weeks at the Flaming Cliffs, we were still finding fossils. Each one seemed finer than the last. One beautiful skeleton was lying on its belly. The head and neck were stretched out and the legs drawn up as if it were about to crawl forward. The dinosaur lay exactly as it died 70 million years ago. The fine red sand had drifted gently over the body before the flesh dropped away. Every bone was in place, even to the end of the tail. Tendons along the back showed plainly. Where the stomach had been, there were a dozen rounded pebbles. The dinosaur must have swallowed them to help grind up his food as a chicken swallows gravel. Although most of the fossils were Protoceratops, 2 or 3 kinds of small flesh-eating dinosaurs were discovered. We also found parts of a crocodile. That shows there must have been a stream or small lake in the basin at some time. The geologists are sure, however, that when Protoceratops lived there, the climate was dry. It was a semi-desert. While we were reaping this wonderful harvest of fossils, my mind was not at rest. As leader of the expedition, I was responsible for the health and safety of the men, as well as for the work. Food was very low. Only enough gasoline remained for 1 car. Meron had not arrived with our supplies. I sent out our Mongols on horseback to see if they could find our camels. They returned with no word. Day after day we scanned the horizon. Always disappointment. Hundreds of gazelles lived on the plains north of the Flaming Cliffs. From horseback I could kill 3 or 4 almost any day. So we had meat in plenty, but little else to eat. At last only 2 sacks of flour remained. We needed flour to make paste for removing fossils. When that was gone, work must stop. I asked the men what we should do. For food, the flour would last only a few days. For paste, it would be enough to take out many bones. Everyone voted to use the flour for work. After all, they said, that is more important than food. We won't starve, for there are always gazelles. I was sure that would be their decision. Fossils are much more important to a paleontologist than food. At the end of 5 weeks, one of Meron's Mongols rode into camp. The caravan was safe and only 60 miles away. Many of the camels had died, but 30 had come through with food and gasoline. It was a happy day for us when we saw the big white lead camel stalking across the desert carrying an American flag. The animals were weak and thin, with flapping humps and flat bellies, but with rest and food, they would soon recover. They had brought enough food and supplies for us to continue our work. Only 100 miles from the Flaming Cliffs, we discovered another wonderful place. This we called the Oshi Basin. I saw it first when standing at the top of a mountain. As far as my eyes could see in any direction, the country was unexplored. Off to the north, a strange red plateau crowned with black glowed in the sunlight. This was something new and different. We went to it through a rocky gateway between high cliffs. There in the very center of a long valley stood a blood-red plateau. It was covered with black lava, like the chocolate frosting on a giant's cake. A stone wall shut off the entrance to the valley. That had been made by human hands thousands of years before Mongols came into the country. At the far end, the valley broke off into a wild maze of ravines and gullies. We camped on the very edge of a deep canyon. In the evening shadows, the rocks took on fantastic shapes. We seem to be living in the world of a long gone yesterday. At any moment I imagine that dinosaurs might wander to the doorways of our tents from out of the gloomy chasms. Dinosaurs had been there more than 100 million years ago in the Upper Jurassic period. That we knew because we found their bones. They were of the sauropoda, the giant dinosaurs, like Brontosaurus. These reptiles usually lived along the marshy shores of lakes. Therefore, this valley must have had water at one time, with a warm tropical climate and lush vegetation. There were not many bones, but enough to tell us that those dinosaurs were larger even than Brontosaurus or Diplodocus. In this valley, Dr. Granger found a ledge of pure iron. In it lay the skeleton of a small dinosaur. The bones had become iron also. He tried to take it out, but the metal blunted his steel implements. At last he decided to leave it. Enough of the skeleton was exposed to show that it belonged to a new family of dinosaurs. All he could do was to make drawings of what was there. Another small dinosaur proved to be of great importance. It was only a little fellow. Professor Osborn named it Psittacosaurus. Its chief characteristic was the very deep pointed beak like a parrot. Other features of the skeleton showed that it probably was the direct ancestor of Protoceratops, and thus of all ceratopsian dinosaurs. Perhaps you wonder why I have written so much about these little dinosaurs. Even though they were small, they showed that the group of ceratopsians started in Mongolia and Central Asia. After millions of years, they began to wander. They went northwest to Siberia and across the land bridge that connected Asia and America at the Bering Straits. All the time they were getting bigger. When they had spread over northern America, they reached their greatest size in Triceratops. It was then, at the end of this Cretaceous period, that they and all other dinosaurs disappeared from the face of the earth.